What if I told you the $35 billion garden industry is absolutely terrified of your bedroom closet? They have engineered a system where you are nothing but a monthly subscriber to their plastic bags of dirt, their blue chemical powders, and their brittle plastic hoses. They survive on one single fragile lie, hoping you never realize you need absolutely nothing they sell to grow your own food. Today, we are tearing down that lie forever. We are uncovering 6 forgotten ancient methods that will turn your garden into a 100% off-grid, self-sustaining biological fortress. Method number 1 will save you hundreds of dollars on soil alone. Method number 2 will permanently sever your reliance on the city water grid. But it is method number 3 that will force your tomatoes to grow twice as fast using a shocking secret hanging in your closet right now. Methods 4 and 5 will build an impenetrable armor against weeds and physical pests. And finally, method 6 will cast an invisible chemical shield, yielding fruit so heavy the branches will snap if you do not support them. You are going to look at your wardrobe in a completely different way by the end of this. Let us begin by destroying the very foundation of the modern gardening scam. Before the invention of industrial soil additives in the 1940s, early Scottish Highlanders and rural European farmers faced a massive problem. They often had to grow food in rocky, shallow, or heavy clay terrain that suffocated plant roots. They could not simply drive to a megastore and buy bags of fluffy potting mix. Instead, they looked to the ancient architecture of the forest floor. Today, millions of well-meaning gardeners march blindly into stores to buy overpriced bags of perlite, vermiculite, and expanded clay pebbles to recreate what those farmers did for free. Perlite is strip-mined, shipped across the ocean, and heavily processed in fossil fuel-burning furnaces heated to 1600 degrees, only to eventually float to the top of your soil and blow away. We are going to hijack the Scottish Highlander method and build a pine cone foundation. To build this correctly, you cannot just grab any debris from the forest. You must seek out completely dry, fully opened brown pine cones. Do not ever use tightly closed green pine cones, as they are still packed with sticky, slow-decomposing sap that will bind your soil. You want the ones that have flared open looking like little wooden flowers, because those open scales are what create the maximum volume of trapped air. You need to gather enough of these flared cones to create a dense, interlocking layer exactly 4 to 6 inches, or about 10 to 15 centimeters, thick at the absolute bottom of your container or raised bed. Let us do the garden math on this. By displacing the bottom 30% of a standard 4x8 raised bed with free pine cones, you are instantly saving $60 to $80 in premium organic soil. But the real magic happens in year 2. As the pine cones finally begin to break down, they release a powerful compound called humic acid. This acts as a natural chelator in your soil. It chemically unlocks trapped trace minerals like iron and calcium that are completely unavailable to your plants, making them instantly bioavailable. But here is the fatal mistake that ruins thousands of gardens every spring. When people go to the forest to collect cones, they often rake up massive piles of fresh green pine needles along with them and throw the entire mixture into their beds. If you do this, you will poison your own harvest. Fresh pine needles are highly acidic and packed with terpenes that actively suppress seed germination and stunt the growth of young vegetable roots. You must separate the dry cones from the fresh needles. Furthermore, before you dump your bucket of collected pine cones into your garden, spread them out on a tarp in the hot sun for an afternoon. This simple step forces any hiding forest pests, like destructive grubworms, to flee the light, ensuring you do not introduce predators into your pristine soil. When you throw your topsoil over these clean cones, it does not pack down into concrete. The pine cones act as a rigid skeleton, maintaining perfect aeration. As the seasons change, the pine cone scales literally expand and contract with the moisture levels of the earth, physically tilling the bottom of your soil for you. So you have completely bypassed the soil industry. You saved your money right from the start, and your plant roots are breathing perfectly in their pine cone fortress. But what happens when the brutal, merciless July heat hits? Long before electric water pumps existed, wandering Germanic tribes learned to bury fallen trees under mounds of earth to capture spring rains, a technique known as hugelkultur. Meanwhile, The Roman Empire, expanding into the scorching deserts of North Africa, buried unglazed terracotta vessels filled with water next to their crops. Today, the modern concept of watering from the top down every single day is an unnatural myth invented entirely to sell you irrigation equipment. It is time to combine the ancient Germanic and Roman methods to build a perpetual water battery. Right on top of your pine cone foundation, you are going to lay down thick chunks of rotting dead wood. But if you make one fatal mistake right here, you will instantly kill your entire garden and poison the soil for a decade. Never, under any circumstances, bury black walnut, cedar, eucalyptus, or fresh pine logs. Black walnut contains a highly toxic chemical compound called juglone, an evolutionary weapon designed to kill any competing plants nearby. Cedar and eucalyptus are packed with intense, natural antimicrobial oils and resins that will completely halt the decomposition process, effectively sterilizing your soil and starving your fungal networks. You must only use heavily rotting, spongy hardwoods like oak, maple, apple, or birch. Lay these spongy hardwood chunks down, and they will act as a massive underground reservoir, absorbing heavy rains. Before you cover that wood with soil, you must install the olla. Take a cheap, unglazed terracotta clay pot. To make this work, you must completely seal the drainage hole at the bottom. Do not just put a rock over it. You must use a waterproof silicone sealant or tightly jam a natural wine cork into the hole so that not a single drop of water can escape through the bottom. Bury this sealed pot right in the center of your bed, resting it against the spongy wood, leaving only the top rim exposed above the soil line. For the physics of this ancient Roman technology to function properly, you must understand the planting radius. The osmotic pull of the terracotta will only reach outward through the soil for about 18 to 24 inches in every direction. Therefore, you must plant your water-hungry crops strictly within this radius. As the surrounding soil dries out, the plant roots physically wrap themselves around the buried clay pot, pulling the water through the microscopic pores of the terracotta using pure osmotic pressure. They drink exactly what they need, exactly when they need it. But here is the hidden science of symbiosis happening underground. As the olla keeps the surrounding area perfectly moist, microscopic beneficial mycorrhizal fungi begin to colonize the outside of the terracotta. This fungal network literally bridges the gap between the rotting hardwood and your tomato roots. The fungi trade the broken-down wood lignin directly to the plant in exchange for plant sugars. It is an underground biological economy running completely on autopilot. You simply fill the pot with water once every 2 weeks, put a lid on it to stop mosquitoes, and nature handles the rest. But there is a strict warning for anyone living in cold climates. If you do not physically empty the water out of your olla before the first hard winter freeze hits, the expanding ice will violently shatter the terracotta underground, completely destroying your water battery. Now you have free, perfect drainage and an endless, off-grid supply of water. But water alone will not make your tomatoes explode with a massive, record-breaking harvest. They need heavy amounts of nitrogen to build thick stems and massive leaves. Here is a massive problem that experienced gardeners know all too well. When you bury rotting wood in your soil, it triggers a process called nitrogen tie-up. The bacteria breaking down that hardwood require immense amounts of nitrogen to do their job, and they will ruthlessly steal it from the surrounding soil, completely starving your vegetable plants. The chemical companies are desperate for you to solve this by pouring their synthetic blue powders onto your soil, which actively burn the microscopic fungal networks and wash away in the first rain, poisoning local rivers. This is exactly where the shocking secret from your closet comes into play to completely neutralize that nitrogen tie-up. I want you to go to your bedroom and grab an old sweater. If you do not own one, go to your local thrift store and buy the most damaged, moth-eaten sweater on the clearance rack for exactly $1. But before you even think about taking scissors to that fabric, you must read the clothing tag. This is the single most critical warning of this entire process. If that tag says it is a poly blend, if it contains acrylic, nylon, polyester, or elastane, throw it in the garbage immediately. If you bury synthetic fabrics, you are not fertilizing your garden. You are permanently polluting your soil with toxic microplastics that will eventually be absorbed into the very food you are eating. The tag must say 100% pure animal wool. It can be sheep wool, alpaca, or cashmere, but it must be pure organic fiber. Science has proven exactly why pure wool is a miracle. It contains a staggering 14% pure nitrogen, significantly more by weight than premium horse or cow manure. Cut that pure wool sweater into small squares and strips. When you introduce this massive 14% nitrogen hit from the keratin directly next to the rotting wood, you completely neutralize the nitrogen tie-up. The wool feeds both the wood-eating bacteria and your tomatoes perfectly, balancing the entire system. Now pay close attention to the application. You cannot simply wrap these pure nitrogen bombs directly around the fragile white roots of your new vegetable seedlings. Because wool is so incredibly dense with raw nutrients, placing it in direct contact with young roots will cause severe nitrogen burn, scorching the plant before it even has a chance to grow. Instead, lay the wool pieces directly over your underground water battery, nestled next to the rotting wood. Then, you must add a 2 to 3 inch buffer layer of neutral topsoil over the wool before placing your plant into the bed. This soil buffer gives the microscopic bacteria and fungi the time and space they need to begin breaking down the tough keratin fibers. As they digest the sweater, they slowly drip-feed your tomatoes the absolute perfect, gentle dose of natural nitrogen from below, while the wool fibers trap incredible amounts of moisture right where the roots need it. Of course, with all this rich, moisture-retaining soil and free nitrogen, every weed seed within a 5-mile radius will try to invade your bed. In the early 1900s, market gardeners used heavy burlap sacks from global trade routes to suppress weeds. Today, the entire internet will confidently tell you to just cover the ground with Amazon delivery cardboard or expensive black landscape fabric. Stop doing this immediately. Modern delivery boxes are heavily sprayed with toxic waterproofing chemicals, bound with synthetic glues, and loaded with forever chemicals known as PFAS that will leach directly into your root zone. Black landscape fabric is just spun plastic that slowly bakes the soil and breaks down into microplastics. But more importantly, let us look at the underground science. Black plastic superheats the earth beneath it, baking the topsoil and driving your vital earthworms deep underground to escape the fatal heat. We're going back to the 1920s method to create an earthworm haven. Drive down to your local independent coffee roaster or cafe. Ask them for a stack of their empty raw green coffee bean burlap sacks. They will gladly give you as many as you want for free. Lay these thick jute coffee sacks directly over your topsoil around your plants. Weeds are relentless ancient survivors. When you lay the burlap sacks down, you must use the overlap technique. Every single edge of the sack must overlap the next one by at least 4 to 5 inches, creating overlapping scales of armor. If you just butt the edges together, aggressive weeds like bindweed will shoot straight up through the seams. Once you have created this impenetrable shield of pure jute, you face the next problem, which is the wind. A dry burlap sack is essentially a sail. To secure this armor permanently, you can pin the overlapping seams down using heavy-duty galvanized steel landscape staples or weigh the corners down with heavy river rocks. My personal favorite method is the water-soaking technique. Once the sacks are perfectly positioned, take your hose and saturate the thick jute fibers until they are completely waterlogged and heavy. The wet burlap will physically mold to the contours of your soil, sticking to the mud like a second skin. As it dries, it forms a heavy, breathable crust that the wind cannot lift. Unlike plastic, this wet, breathable burlap creates a cool, damp paradise on the surface. Earthworms will migrate directly under the sacks, seeking the perfect moisture. They will spend their entire lives aerating your topsoil and leaving nutrient-dense castings right at the base of your plants, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. At the end of the year, it simply rots down into pure carbon. Your off-grid garden system is now a completely dialed-in, self-watering, self-feeding fortress, heavily armored against weeds. But the moment your lush, green vegetable seedlings push through the soil, they face a devastating physical threat. Slugs and snails will emerge from the darkness and completely decimate your young seedlings overnight, stripping them down to bare, pathetic stems. The multi-billion-dollar chemical industry wants you panicking. They want you running to the hardware store to buy expensive blue slug pellets. What they hide in the fine print is that the active ingredient, metaldehyde, is a violent, indiscriminate neurotoxin. It does not just kill slugs. When it dissolves into your soil, it severely poisons the very earthworms you just worked so hard to attract. Worse, it is highly toxic to local songbirds and can be fatal to family pets that accidentally ingest it. You are poisoning your own sanctuary. Instead, we are going to deploy a completely forgotten trick that relies on pure, unstoppable physics. Go into your garage and find some scrap bare copper wire from old electrical cables, or gather a handful of old, pure copper pennies. You're going to create a tight, unbroken ring of pure copper resting directly on the soil around the exact base of your vulnerable plant stem. Do not leave a single gap. The physics behind this are absolutely fascinating. Slugs and snails navigate the world using a highly conductive, water-based slime mucus. When that highly conductive slime physically touches the pure bare copper, it creates an instant electrochemical reaction. It literally generates a microscopic electric shock directly to the slug's highly sensitive nervous system. It does not kill them, but it forces them to violently recoil in pain and turn away instantly. You have just installed a permanent, free, zero-toxin electric fence around your food. It costs absolutely nothing, it never needs batteries, it never poisons the birds, and unlike chemical powders, it never washes away in the heavy spring rain. Your crops are now physically untouchable. But there is one final devastating hurdle you must face in late summer. A humid rainstorm rolls through, bringing the dreaded late blight. The leaves turn black, the stems rot, and the plant drops its flowers out of pure stress, while the leaves begin to turn a sickly pale yellow. The agricultural giants want you panicking and spraying heavy copper fungicides, but to ensure your plants produce hundreds of actual fruits, you need to steal one final trick from the desperate farmers of the 1930s Dust Bowl era. They noticed that striking a match produced sulfur, the exact same elemental compound that ancient Roman vineyard owners used to keep mold off their grapes. Before you put your tomato transplant into the soil, go to your kitchen and grab a standard box of wooden matches. This trick is an absolute, undeniable game changer specifically for the nightshade family. If you are growing tomatoes, bell peppers, hot peppers, or eggplants, you must do this, as they have incredibly high phosphorus demands and are notoriously susceptible to blights and chlorosis. Drop exactly 5 unlit matchsticks directly into the bottom of the planting hole. Do not break the heads off. Toss the entire wooden stick in. You want to space the 5 matches out evenly in a small circle at the very bottom of the hole, creating a microscopic ring of power directly where the deepest tap roots will eventually push down. You want the roots to physically touch and grow through this dissolving ring. As the match head slowly dissolves in the wet soil over the season, the plant absorbs the elemental sulfur, which acts as a powerful, systemic, natural fungicide. It builds an invisible chemical shield inside the vascular system of the plant, making it highly resistant to late blight and root rot from the inside out. Simultaneously, the red phosphorus from the match head is consumed by the expanding roots, providing the exact chemical trigger the plant needs to initiate explosive, massive flowering and fruit production. But the forgotten science goes even deeper. Beyond just fighting blight and boosting flowers, the sulfur in the match head actively creates a micro-adjustment to the soil pH. Nightshades absolutely crave slight acidity. As the match dissolves, it creates a tiny, concentrated pocket of acidity right at the vital root tip. This precise pH shift instantly unlocks trace elements like iron and zinc from the surrounding soil, flooding the plant with nutrients and permanently preventing those yellowing leaves known as chlorosis. You just completely defeated a multi-billion-dollar agricultural monopoly using forgotten history. Let us look at the autonomous biological fortress you just built. You created a breathing skeleton out of dry pine cones. You built a perpetual underground water battery using rotting hardwood and a sealed terracotta clay pot. You planted an unstoppable nitrogen bomb using an old wool sweater. You armored your soil against weeds with water-soaked coffee bags, erected a permanent electric fence using scrap copper, and cast an invisible chemical shield using 5 simple matchsticks. Are you going to sacrifice an old sweater to the soil gods this weekend? Or are you hunting for copper wire, Let me know down in the comments right now. Subscribe to join the resistance and click the video on your screen right now to discover the bizarre trick to banish aphids overnight using nothing but